Welcome to Clandestine Cases, where every story unravels a new enigma waiting to be solved. Join us as we dive into Miss Marple and Ghosts of the Glass Garden, a fan-made story created to celebrate the charm and brilliance of Agatha Christie's legendary detective. We'd love to have you with us on this thrilling journey. Share your thoughts, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if you spot any errors, do let us know. Your feedback helps us bring you even better mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The Murmur of Midnight. The clock in Miss Marple's sitting room chimed 10, each note echoing gently along the narrow walls of her quaint cottage, blending with the rhythm of the rain, tapping insistently against the window panes. Outside, an unsettling stillness hung heavy over the village of St. Mary Mead, broken only by the occasional rustle of the trees that swayed with the wind's breath. Miss Marple settled deeper into her armchair, a steaming cup of tea nestled in her hands, while a mystery novel lay open on her lap, its pages faded, but rich with promise. She had planned an evening of cozy solitude. Little did she know, the night would soon spiral into chaos. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the tranquil air, shattering the night with such ferocity that Miss Marple leapt to her feet, her heart racing. It came from the direction of the old Hawthorne Manor, a sprawling estate that loomed on the outskirts of the village. Memories flickered through her mind, a past tea shared with the elderly Lady Hawthorne, whose sharp tongue and sharper intellect had endured many a village gossip. The manor had been remarkably quiet of late, an eerie silence enveloping it like a shroud. But now, the scream's chilling echo sent waves of dread rippling through her. Miss Marple hurriedly donned her coat and scarf, her curiosity piqued despite the cold grip of fear that enveloped her. She found herself navigating the narrow, muddy path toward the manor, rain-soaked leaves glistening under the moonlight. When she arrived, a small crowd of villagers had already gathered, their faces etched with shock and concern. Constable Perkins stood at the gate, trying to maintain order, but the air buzzed with questions and anxious whispers. "Is it true, sir?" Miss Pritchard, the village schoolteacher, gasped as she clutched her umbrella like a lifeline. "I heard. They found Lady Hawthorne dead." "Pouring rain and no sign of light," the constable replied, waving them back. His brow was knitted, uncertainty knitting deeper lines across his forehead. "We're going in." With a determined heart, Miss Marple joined the small procession as they moved through the grand arching doors of Hawthorne Manor. As they entered, the musty air, heavy with age, enveloped her. A flash of shadows danced across the walls, exaggerating the size of the imposing portraits that glared down at them, their hollow eyes reflecting the unease that filled the space. She recalled a time when Lady Hawthorne commanded the room with her vibrant stories and strong opinions, but now the heart of the manor felt far too still. They entered the drawing room, and there, amid the rich tapestries and opulent furniture, lay Lady Hawthorne. Her lifeless body was sprawled elegantly on the carpet, a look of surprise etched onto her delicate features. The crimson of her blood contrasted sharply against the muted hues of the room, an unapologetic reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded. She lay, undiscovered until now, despite the fact that her door had been locked from the inside, a lock that not even Constable Perkins had been able to force open, leading to inevitable tension in the air. Several gasps echoed behind her, but Miss Marple's keen eyes were drawn toward a single, small detail. At Lady Hawthorne's fingertips lay a collection of rolled notes, their edges frayed as if they'd been recently disturbed. Just as she bent closer to inspect them, Perkins cleared his throat loudly. "Now see here, everyone. If you could kindly step back, I need to speak with Miss Marple," he instructed, the authority in his voice barely holding back the rising panic that swirled around them. "Miss Marple," Miss Pritchard interjected. "But what can she possibly know? A locked room and a dead woman. How on earth could that be her business?" Miss Marple did not flinch. She was used to the skepticism of some villagers. "I can assure you, dear Miss Pritchard, that the scene holds secrets, and every detail matters. I would say our dear lady was attempting to communicate something significant." "What do you mean?" Constable Perkins asked, his patience waning. "The letters," Miss Marple murmured, her gaze unwavering from the victim. "Those were no mere notes, but a plea for urgency. I have seen such behavior before, a desperate effort to reach someone of great importance." As Perkins inspected the papers, Miss Marple turned to a familiar face among the crowd. Dominic Lark, Lady Hawthorne's estranged nephew, whose smouldering resentment had long been whispered about in the village. They had known each other in childhood, but he had grown up framed by bitterness and jealousy, particularly since his aunt had steadfastly refused to support him financially in his later years. He stood apart from the throng, his dark eyes flickering with a mixture of concern and a glint of something else, perhaps relief. "Dominic," she said softly, moving closer as the crowd continued murmuring. "What were you doing here tonight?" He merely shrugged, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I came to check on her. She can be so reclusive, you know." Miss Marple regarded him, her instincts sharpening as tension threaded the air. There was something he was not revealing, something that stirred unease deep in her gut. As the constable finally unfolded one of the letters, an exclamation trembled from his lips. "It's her handwriting. She wrote to someone named Henry." At that moment, thunder rumbled ominously overhead, and rain battered against the windows with a newfound intensity. Within the creaks of the estate, an unsettling murmur echoed. Secrets waiting to rise from silence. Conspiracies hiding among familiar faces. And as Miss Marple stood enveloped in shadows, she felt an undeniable truth forming. A connection neither she nor the audience could yet see. There would be no sleeping tonight in St. Mary Mead. The murmur of midnight had only just begun. Chapter 2. The Uninvited Shadow. The relentless rain drummed against the aging roof of Hawthorne Manor, a constant mournful sound that mingled with the tense whispers of the gathered villagers. As Miss Marple stood amidst the swirling atmosphere of shock and intrigue, she felt a flicker of unease settle within her like a persistent chill. The mystery of Lady Hawthorne's demise tightened its grip on St. Mary Mead, and an unsettling thought lingered at the edge of her mind. Something about this evening's events seemed eclipsed by a shadow that had eluded her initial scrutiny. Constable Perkins surveyed the room, particularly the villagers' faces, which oscillated between horror and morbid curiosity. Miss Pritchard remained agitated, her umbrella abandoned at her feet, while Dominic Lark's false bravado hung palpably in the air. That's when Miss Marple noted the subtle change around her. There was a figure that had not yet been acknowledged, a pair of dark, stormy eyes flitting in and out of the dim light beyond the drawing-room doors. A second cousin of Lady Hawthorne's, faintly recalled from childhood memories perhaps, but he had been an uninvited spectre prior to this evening's calamity. Something told her he had slipped in unnoticed. "Miss Marple, right?" A new voice interjected, drawing her away from her thoughts. It was Mr. Hartley, the village baker, his flour-dusted apron contrasting sharply with the grave atmosphere. "Did you hear the whispers about the guest who was here right before?" Well, Miss Marple regarded him carefully. A guest, you say? Who might that be? I saw nobody other than the villagers when I arrived. Name was Quinton. Quinton Shaw, he whispered, lowering his voice as though sharing a forbidden secret. He was here earlier in the day, they say. Something about Lady Hawthorne's affairs, though he left just before it happened. Quinton Shaw, Miss Marple mused, letting the name roll around in her mind. Reports of an unexpected visit piqued her interest, but she quickly detected the twinge of nervousness in Hartley's demeanor. And how exactly do you know of this gentleman? I overheard Finley, the gardener, mention it. Something about family matters. Quinton, well, he's a bit of a recluse, they say, often at odds with the rest of the family over finances. The baker hesitated, glancing nervously towards the door, then continued. Seems like Lady Hawthorne kept her secrets, but Quinton was the kind of man who could cause ripples around here. A ripple indeed, Miss Marple thought, as she searched the faces around her. No one looked more troubled than Dominic Lark, whose posture had morphed from indifference to a guarded tension. It was the look of a man protecting more than just a reputation. Miss Marple sensed the undercurrent of rivalry rippling beneath the surface, a desperate clawing for Lady Hawthorne's legacy, her treasures, perhaps something even darker. Seems we have more questions than answers tonight, Miss Marple remarked thoughtfully, her gaze wandering back to the lifeless figure surrounded by remnants of elegant life, but now steeped in death. How curious that her final moments were shared alongside an unresolved family affair. As rain poured relentlessly outside, the drawing room became a hushed pocket of anxiety and anticipation. Miss Marple's mind raced as she pieced together the fragments of information. Curtains drawn tight in families often harbor storms just waiting to burst, she declared quietly. She approached the body once more, drawn to the letters lying so close to Lady Hawthorne's lifeless fingers. The constable continued his efforts to understand them, but Miss Marple knelt down, and one particular note caught her eye. Its ink was smudged, yet the last 3 words seemed desperately clear. Meet me tonight. Constable Perkins, she said softly, weaving her way back through the morose onlookers. You must examine these letters further. Who knows what this Quinton might reveal about Our Lady's final intentions? Perkins nodded, now intent on collecting the letters, his previous doubts seemingly dissipating in the light of Miss Marple's measured approach. She turned to look for Dominic, sensing his presence was crucial to uncovering the truth. But he had vanished, slipping through the worried cluster of villagers like a shadow in the night. With the rain continuing its symphony, Miss Marple felt the pulse of the mystery quickening within her. She stepped outside, the air thick with fog and unresolved tension, and glanced around. It was then she saw him, a fleeting figure near the manor's garden, illuminated for just a moment by a flash of lightning. Heart pounding, Miss Marple pushed through the crowd and darted toward the dark silhouette. Dominic, she called out, her voice stilling the night. He turned, and for an instant, the flickering light revealed a face twisted with concern. What do you want, Miss Marple? Asked, his tone a mix of irritation and fear, his back to the manor, as though he might depart altogether. Lady Hawthorne is gone. There's nothing more. Go back inside. Unless, of course, you're hiding something, she ventured carefully, watching his reaction. I believe you were exceptionally close to her, were you not? A flicker of panic darted across his features, but just as swiftly it hardened into something else, a realization that perhaps the ties binding him to the Hawthorne legacy were weaker than he had believed. I had nothing to do with it, he spat, a hint of desperation leaking through his bravado. You think I could... But at that moment, all pretense crumbled, as a third figure emerged from the darkness, revealing Quinton Shaw himself. He stood there, drenched and panting, an expression of urgent anxiety etched on his face. I need to speak to you, Miss Marple. It's urgent. I've come to warn you, he stammered, looking between her and Dominic, who now appeared trapped in the unmaking of his own reality. A chill slithered up Miss Marple's spine. The storm was not merely outside. The true tempest had yet to break within Hawthorne Manor, and the uninvited shadow, looming just beyond its walls, now sought to reveal the heart of the mystery that consumed them all. Chapter 3. A letter that came too late. The storm raged on with a furious intensity as Miss Marple stood in the drawing room of Hawthorne Manor, the rain battering against the windows like frantic fingers pleading for entrance. The smell of damp wood and antique furniture hung in the air, mingling with an unshakable tension that seemed to envelop every corner of the grand, but now somber, space. It was only hours since Lady Hawthorne's tragic demise had shocked St. Mary Mead. Yet in that time, the foundation of the village's tranquility felt as if it had been irrevocably undermined. Miss Marple's mind raced, orbiting around the facts collected thus far. The letters uncovered at the scene were still fresh in her thoughts, each one a thread weaving into the larger tapestry of a puzzle demanding resolution. The stakes heightened when the hushed whispers of the villagers hinted at secrets buried deep within the Hawthorne family. Now, as the night wore on, a sliver of anticipation sliced through the murkiness of despair. A sudden knock at the door shattered her concentration, a sound that echoed through the far-off hall like thunder. Constable Perkins, who had been searching through the remnants of the evening's events, turned sharply toward the entrance, with a frown. Who could that be at a time like this? He muttered. But before he could assume the authority of the moment, a servant, Mrs. Clancy, the widow who managed the manor's affairs, entered, holding a trembling letter in her shaking hands. Begging your pardon, but this arrived just moments ago, she stammered, her pale complexion accentuated by the flickering candlelight. With bated breath, she presented the letter like a fragile offering. Postmarked today. It's for Lady Hawthorne. Miss Marple's heart quickened as she carefully lifted the envelope. It was addressed in a hurried script, gathering her attention like a moth drawn to flame. To whom does it come from, Mrs. Clancy? She inquired, her voice steady but urgent. Doesn't say, Miss Marple. Just for Lady Hawthorne, but it reeks of desperation, does it not? The widow replied, her eyes wide with concern. Indeed, Miss Marple murmured, her fingers trembling slightly as she tore open the envelope. The rain outside intensified, matching her heartbeat as she pulled out the letter, the scent of ink and parchment filling her senses. But just as she began to read, a gust of wind slammed the window open, causing the letter to flutter violently in her grasp. No, Miss Marple gasped as the fragile paper whipped past her, disintegrating into shreds, each piece swirling into the dim air like trapped secrets escaping their captor. Chaos erupted as the constable reached to catch what he could. Steady now. What did it say? He urged. But it was too late. What had been a desperate cry for help had become a fragmented riddle. Through the whirlwind of emotion, Miss Marple gathered herself and began piecing together fragments scattered on the floor. We may yet find a clue, she murmured, bending down to collect the shreds. Each bit of evidence speaks, even as it falls apart. Dominic Lark hovered nearby, concern etched into his pale features. A letter sent today? How could someone know to send a message, if indeed it was important, on such a fateful night? His brow furrowed with agitation, and Miss Marple noted the flicker of anxiety in his eyes. An excellent question, Mr. Lark. Perhaps a communication, orchestrated by guilt or fear, seeking sanctuary, or an avenue for trust, Miss Marple suggested, her voice firm yet soothing. Except instead of reaching its destination, it has been ruthlessly silenced. As her mind spun in circles of intrigue, she determined to examine the torn fragments closely. This was to be a confession, I suspect, or a warning of sorts, she continued, her gaze narrowing on the few intact segments. Something remarkably significant, a betrayal, or perhaps a threat. Is it safe to assume the author is connected to Lady Hawthorne? Constable Perkins inquired, a shadow of skepticism creeping into his words. Miss Marple turned her attention to him, gesturing for silence. Hold your thoughts, Constable. Take a good look. The hurried scrawl. This does not belong to Lady Hawthorne. The letters intertwine. This is less of a plea and more an accusation. That's quite a leap, Miss Marple, Perkins exclaimed, incredulity painted across his face. Yet her conviction remained unyielding. It is not mere speculation, she insisted, gesturing to the cleaner edges of the torn pieces. There's an urgency in the angles. Look here, how the ink has smudged at this corner. The writer was frantic, and what remains of this sentence suggests they were compelled to warn Lady Hawthorne of a misdeed. By whom? The very nephew who resented her, Dominic interjected sharply, his voice rising above the tumult. Or someone closer still? Miss Marple narrowed her eyes. Or perhaps someone intent on concealing an ugly truth from unraveling. This letter could bear witness to a hidden enemy, a conflict that, if revealed, might shatter the values of family loyalty. Just then, Mrs. Clancy scuttled back into the drawing room, eyes wide with fresh alarm. More bad news, if I may, Constable. What now? Perkins sighed, his patience unraveling with each added layer of chaos. I was just informed that Quinton Shaw has disappeared, she said breathlessly, a tremor in her voice palpable. He left the grounds moments ago. No one knows where he went. Miss Marple's heart sank as twisting revelations began to form, like tendrils, in her mind. Quinton's hasty exit was no small thing. He had been visibly agitated, and now, it seemed, just as the letter had vanished, so too had one of the key players in this dangerous game. Tell me, Mrs. Clancy, Miss Marple asserted, has anyone seen Dominic Lark since the commotion began? No, not since he spoke with Miss Marple, she admitted, glancing around the room as a palpable tension descended. He slipped away into the gardens amidst the chaos. Miss Marple felt a jolt of realization. The pieces were shifting, just as the menacing storm outside continued its relentless barrage. She turned sharply to Perkins. If Dominic is indeed rooted in this narrative, we must revisit the gardens. Too many threads converge there for our own good, and Quinton's silent haste leaves far too many open questions. Then we'd best not waste a moment, Perkins replied, anxiety threading through his voice. Lead the way. With quickened steps, the trio ventured into the downpour, darkness enveloping the night as lightning lit their path. As they crossed the threshold into the garden, an air of dread thickened around them. Each shadows lengthened and morphed into looming shapes stirring at the periphery. And then came the sharp sound of gravel crunching beneath hurried footsteps. A fleeting moment captured Miss Marple's gaze, a shattered glimpse of Dominic, retreating into the darkness beyond. As she darted after him, a chilling thought pierced her. Was he seeking answers, or desperately trying to conceal a truth that might alter the very fabric of their lives? Chapter 4. A Will That Was Never Signed. The soft patter of rain against the window pane whispered secrets only the storm could understand. Shadows danced across the drawing room of Hawthorne Manor, their grotesque shapes accentuated by the flickering candlelight. Miss Marple sat poised at the edge of her armchair, a fresh cup of tea forgotten on the table beside her, as she stared at the gathering of villagers. The tension crackled in the air, thick enough to slice. Just as she began to wrap her mind around the evening's revelations, the sudden arrival of Mrs. Clancy caught her off guard. "Miss Marple, you must come quickly." The housekeeper's voice trembled as she burst through the heavy door, rain splashing onto the floor as if the storm were determined to join their conversation. "What is it, Mrs. Clancy?" Miss Marple rose, already sensing the weight of urgency in the woman's posture, a reflection of impending chaos. Her heart beat faster, anticipation curling within, like a spring, ready to release its tension. "It's the will. Lady Hawthorne's will," Mrs. Clancy gasped, dragging a handkerchief across her brow. "It's gone, and I believe it was never signed." A chilling silence filled the room, the revelation echoing with the tumult of thunder outside. "What do you mean, never signed?" Constable Perkins demanded, his brow furrowing as fragments of the mystery twisted around him. "Just before that is, just hours before," Mrs. Clancy stammered. "Lady Hawthorne spoke about an updated will, saying she wanted to assure Dominic his inheritance would be protected. I thought all was well, but I've searched through her desk and the safe. There is not a trace of it." Miss Marple felt the air prickling with possibilities. "Have you any idea who she might have consulted regarding this document?" "Only her solicitor, Mr. Alan Forster." Mrs. Clancy's eyes darkened. A look of revelation splashed across her features. "But surely, one must have had it drawn up before it could be signed. I overheard her mention Mr. Forster nurturing a business partnership that could be changed substantially." "Why on earth," Dominic interjected, a sharp edge in his voice, "would you keep such a significant discussion private from the family, especially in light of recent events? And why would you care, Mr. Lark?" Miss Pritchard shot back, her eyes darting between the two men as tensions heightened. "Your concerns seem quite self-serving, don't they?" A flash of indignation crossed Dominic's face. "Self-serving or not, I have a right to know what potential failure could be lurking in the shadows of my inheritance." The undercurrents of animosity in the room sent Miss Marple's thoughts spinning like a top. The purpose of that will may not have been purely kindness. Instead, it sounds as though it could have acted as a bargaining chip, she reasoned, her tone steady. "Mr. Forster may hold the key to a labyrinth of secrets. Mrs. Clancy, please see if you can summon him." "Right away," she said, rushing out into the rain, her silhouette a fleeting memory amidst the storm. Miss Marple felt the weight of the room's disdainful gaze as it shifted toward her. Expectation clung in the air like a taut string. She could sense the desperation rising. Everyone here wanted answers. As the dim light flickered dangerously, she turned her focus back to Dominic and Constable Perkins, whose frowning expressions echoed the depths of their scrutiny. "Dominic," Miss Marple began, her voice measured, "I must inquire about your relationship to Lady Hawthorne. Right now, it seems strained. Are you seriously concerned about her intentions, or simply your inheritance?" He shifted uncomfortably, a look of defiance softening into something more pained. I cared for her, as much as one might care for someone who has forgotten to acknowledge their own family, he replied, the hurt etched deep within his voice. But I can only speculate how her decisions have been clouded by her secrets, expectation, ravaging her loyalties. Secrets, Perkins pressed, his tone wavering between doubt and suspicion. Do you mean rumors concerning your Uncle Quentin? Dominic's shifting stance gave away the subtle fracture in his composure. I cannot fathom why he would seek anything but revenge over an inheritance, he replied coolly, yet something akin to fear paled his complexion. Our family has been twisted by bitterness. If Lady Hawthorne did plan to sign a new will, perhaps he would go to extremes to usurp his claim. The constable nodding, eyes suddenly sharp with scrutiny, as he exchanged a glance with Miss Marple that spoke volumes. I believe you may have a persuasive motive here, Mr. Lark. But I must ask, where were you tonight between the hours of 7 and 8? I was out walking, Dominic mumbled, the sharp edge to his voice dulling as he struggled under the heat of their glances. I needed fresh air. When the squalls subsided a moment later, Mrs. Clancy returned with Mr. Forster in tow, his polished shoes squelching through puddles of grimy water as they entered. You had questions, urgent ones, he queried, removing his hat and shaking off droplets like a hound. Quite. I have reason to believe that Lady Hawthorne expressed intentions for a new will, Miss Marple said, her eyes narrowing as she gauged the man's expression, searching for any hint of misconduct. Did you indeed draft such a document on her behalf? His brow furrowed, lip pulled tight. Yes, but that was only a verbal request. I have no written record, nor did she finalize it. She seemed distraught, caught up in family matters that swirled around her like the storm tonight. His voice rang with sincerity, yet a shadow passed over his features, a flicker of regret. The sort of matters, Miss Marple pressed, feeling her heart race as she moved closer to uncover the truth. Could they have involved Quentin Shaw? Yes, Mr. Forster sighed. Quentin had been threatening to disrupt the family's cohesion. This conflict compelled Lady Hawthorne to discuss alternatives, but alas, she only discussed it. The formalities remained unresolved. A vicious crack of thunder punctuated the tension. Miss Marple leaned closer, her mind working furiously, piecing together the threads of lingering doubt and weak alibis. So there was never a signed will, only conjecture, she deduced. And if Quentin believes the absence of a written document opens the door to claim Lady Hawthorne's estate for himself. No, he wouldn't dare, Dominic exclaimed, a blend of anger and fear clouding his eyes. He'd have to face the fallout of family disgrace. Family dynamics often morph into a volatile cocktail, Miss Marple replied, feeling the weight of quavering ambition that hung heavy before her. And such a cocktail can lead people to bleak measures, especially when reputations and money are at stake. At that moment, a fresh roar of wind whistled through the manor, urging them to slide closer together against the encroaching storm. Meanwhile, Miss Marple's instincts prickled. Their gathering was no longer coincidental. She was drawing them closer to the very center of the mystery. Let us explore Lady Hawthorne's study, she suggested abruptly, feigning a casual demeanor while every sense within her sharpened. Perhaps we may uncover something more substantial, something that can trace our steps back to a crucial decision before it was corrupted. As they stepped into darkness, the creaking floorboards beneath them whispered cryptic hints. With each breath, a foreboding weight pressed against her chest, One last hidden truth remained throughout this swirling tempest of lies, and she would expose it. Every clue would rise to the surface, and they were dancing on the edges of revelation. Unbeknownst to them, lingering shadows of secrets, cast by familiar faces, clung closely, connected by an unseen and sinister thread. As Miss Marple's heart raced, she sensed they were on the verge of a discovery yet to be unveiled, hovering just beyond the horizon of comprehension. And then she noticed it. A glimmer beneath a fallen vase, a tiny piece of paper, crumpled and barely noticeable. With shaking fingers, she withdrew the slip as the tension in the room crescendoed. A mysterious initial, hurriedly scratched, a barely legible cue left behind, whispering promises of dark entanglements as a piercing realization settled upon her. "Domine," she called out sharply, the urgency in her voice underscoring their impending revelations. "I believe we possess far more than a missing will." But before she could finish, a distant sound emerged from within the depths of the study. A gentle creak, almost like footsteps, and a sense of dread slithered into the air. As the tension crescendoed, shadows shifted once again, and Miss Marple knew that trouble was nigh. Something was coming, and with it, the looming storm would carry the perilous secrets that hung precariously over them all. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Air. A crack of thunder reverberated through the air, sending Miss Marple's heart racing, like the frenzied wind slashing through the trees outside Hawthorne Manor. She stood in the dimly lit study, the scent of polished wood and old paper seeping into her senses as she clutched the tiny crumpled slip of paper bearing the mysterious initial Q. An ominous feeling gnawed at her gut. The fleeting shadows were revealing themselves too slowly, and time was trickling away like sand through her fingers. "I must ask you once more, Mr. Foster," she began, keeping her voice even despite the weight of tension in the room. "How do you explain Lady Hawthorne's sudden urgency to alter her will? Had any threats been made against her that might have compelled such an action?" Mr. Forster shifted uncomfortably, his brow damp with perspiration, but any trace of his earlier authority had evaporated. "There were whispers. Nothing I could verify," he murmured, his gaze faltering under the pressure of her steadfast scrutiny. "Mostly rumors about disgruntled family members, people who think they deserve more than they received." "And yet Quinton Shaw had an unusual incentive. Wouldn't you agree?" Miss Marple pressed, her voice like the soft rumble of thunder that continued outside. "He was a man who bore grudges. But did anyone suspect he might act upon them?" "I would think Dominic Lark had far more reason for resentment," Perkins interjected, pacing the ornate carpet, while pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. The room grew silent, each breath heavy with unspoken fears. He was the one most directly impacted by Lady Hawthorne's decisions. Just then, a high-pitched alarm from outside pierced through the stormy evening's ambience, startling them all into a moment of stunned silence. Perkins rushed toward the window, peering through the rain-soaked glass into the shadows beyond the estate. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice laced with apprehension. But even before the question fully formed, the scream resurfaced in Miss Marple's mind, the echoes of dread still vibrant from hours prior. Without a word, she dashed toward the drawing room, her heart pounding with urgency as she stepped through creaking vintage doors. Outside, the moors stretched endlessly before her, a turbulent sea of night swells illuminated by sporadic bursts of lightning. Her eyes drifted to the distant figure, a silhouette emerging like a wraith against the chaotic backdrop. "Dominic," she yelled, sprinting across the stone path with the rain drenching her to the skin. "Come back, you mustn't run away now." As she approached the edge of the manor's garden, her gut twisted sharply. A rising tide of anxiety propelled her forward. But before she could shout again, he vanished into the thick fog, swallowed whole, just like Lady Hawthorne had been, by the enigma of her own life. Panic coursed through Miss Marple. The clues had been laid bare, and yet one, prime suspect, had effectively evaporated. "Over here!" Perkins shouted, his voice panicked and echoing through the storm. Miss Marple turned to see him pointing toward the dew-laden grass, where footprints trailed away from the manor in an erratic line, leading toward the unseen depths of the twilight. "Quickly, we must follow," she urged, her instincts kicking into high gear. They began a careful trek, her mind racing as she endeavored to decipher Dominic's potential whereabouts, the fatal crescendo of his emotions seeming to unfurl before her eyes. Could it be that he ran from us deliberately? Perkins pondered aloud, jogging to keep pace with her. Or perhaps he sensed he would be implicated once Lady Hawthorne's secrets became unspooled. Indeed, it seems he favored notoriety, a compelling motive, she replied, driven by the need to trust her intuition. Yet what secret could compel him to flee? Could he be hiding a deeper connection to the circumstances of Lady Hawthorne's death? Rain drizzled heavily as they pressed forward, their search quickening, while shadows elongated in flickering lamplight. They reached a small clearing, a fountain quietly bubbling amidst wild foliage. There, nestled precariously against the edge of the stone pool, lay a silk handkerchief, the deep navy cloth delicately embroidered with an initial, D. Miss Marple's pulse quickened as she held the handkerchief between her fingers, inspecting it as a detective might a clue to a clandestine rendezvous. "This belongs to Dominic," she breathlessly remarked, turning it over in her hands more carefully. "He may have dropped it in haste, perhaps as he fled to confront someone." "Confront? Or to escape," Perkins added, brows knitting with skepticism. "Do we truly know the nature of what may have transpired tonight?" A soft rustle from nearby foliage made both of them freeze. The anticipation hung heavily in the air as they exchanged worried glances, and Miss Marple instinctively straightened her posture, determined to stand her ground against whatever lay beyond the trees. Just then, a figure stepped into the faint glow of the fountain's light. It wasn't Dominic. Rather, it was Quinton Shaw, disheveled and soaked through, a wild look in his stormy eyes. "I didn't know where else to go," he shouted, breathless and frantic, the rain matting his hair against his forehead. "I swear, I want to help uncover what really happened." Miss Marple's heart raced, while his presence had been shrouded in suspicion. The urgency in his voice hinted at something unexpected. "Where is Dominic, Quinton?" she demanded, scanning the area for any sign of the heir. He was here moments ago," Quinton stammered, pulling his damp garments closer, as if they provided comfort. "He accused me of a foul play, and I had no choice but to run." "What does that mean?" Perkins pressed, stepping closer, fists clenched. "Do you have something to confess?" "No," Quinton exclaimed, his voice breaking. "Nothing of that sort. I received a call out of the blue before all this, before the events unfolded. It was Lady Hawthorne wanting me to come here urgently. I wasn't expecting—" "Expecting what?" Miss Marple interjected, sensing pieces shifting again beneath their feet like quicksand. "I didn't anticipate anybody would hurt her," Quinton gasped, desperation lacing his words. "She never told me anything about—" Before he could finish, Dominic emerged from the misty haze, shaking rain from his hair like a tempestuous animal. His eyes glowed with suppressed fury as he stepped between Quentin and Miss Marple. "You're lying," he spat. "You think you can manipulate all of us into believing you had no part?" "Enough," Miss Marple commanded, raising her voice with authority. "We have enough chaos here without open threats. Perhaps we can start with some clarity. Quentin, who did Lady Hawthorne want you to meet?" "I don't know. I never got a chance to ask," he replied, his eyes darting back to Dominic. "I only came because she insisted that we needed to talk about the family estate. It was integral to what was to happen next." "Then how about the letter? Could you explain why there was a missing will that you were presumed aware of?" Miss Marple pressed, keenly aware of the shadows lurking behind Quentin's otherworldly demeanor. "It had nothing to do with me," Quentin protested, growing more agitated. "I thought she had resolved her issues with Dominic. Yet it seems I have stumbled into a storm brewing inside our family." Suddenly, a desperate scream shattered the night, a cry so profound that it seemed to resonate through all the trees in the manor grounds. "Lady Hawthorne," Perkins thundered, rushing toward the sound, leaving Miss Marple and the brothers behind, the memory of that voice echoing deeper than the rain. "Wait," Miss Marple called, but something deep within her compelled her to remain still. Time hung in balance. Everything hinged upon the final image etched in her mind of that elusive handkerchief and the promise of legacy now shattered across a stormy night. As the cacophony spiraled into a chaotic tide, the memories of Lady Hawthorne's looming shadow grew more vivid, intertwining them all within a labyrinth of family ties steeped in grief. Without a hint of warning, she turned to the path before her to find something vital, a clue still tethered to footsteps marking the earth beyond. Yet before she could pursue, the turmoil spilled forth once again, another heart-wrenching cry echoing, each note a bleeding promise. The fugitive echoes of the vanishing air weaved deftly into a night cloaked in secrets, tangled in treachery, where each answer seemed to yield 10 more questions. A puzzle growing ever more intricate as thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, and reality gave way to chaos, a darkness threatening to consume them all. Chapter 6. A secret stained in guilt. A distinct snap echoed through the damp chill of the garden, nearly obscured by the torrential downpour drenching St. Mary Mead that night. Miss Marple halted, her heart pounding as she turned to the source of the sound. The heavy rain washed the surroundings in a caustic grey, making the world feel utterly alien. Perhaps it was merely a branch surrendering to the storm, or something more sinister, perched in the shadows of the estate's hidden corners, emerging from the ivy-clad walls that had long kept their secrets. Miss Marple found herself stepping into an overgrown plot, veiled in thick foliage. It was profoundly silent here, a stark contrast to the grisly chaos surrounding Lady Hawthorne's death. Vines curled around withered statues of cherubs, their once cherubic smiles turned somber beneath the weight of time. Yet something gnawed at her, a sensation that encouraged her further into the thick embrace of this forgotten haven. Rain splattered at her heels as she moved, the persistent drizzle painting a haunting melody against the backdrop of whispered gossip and looming threats. Just then, her foot caught against something hard, sending her tumbling slightly. She regained her balance quickly, glancing down to find an ornately bound journal half buried in the muddied ground. Strange that it should lie here, so far from the light of the manor, where it could witness the unfolding tragedies. Carefully, she knelt and retrieved the cover slick and peppered with dirt, but the gilded letters glimmered under the shimmer of her lantern. Lady Hawthorne, The Garden Chronicles, it read, and a chill crept down her spine. Without delay, curiosity ignited within her. Miss Marple flipped through the dampened pages, scanning the spidery script. The entries unfolded tales of a garden once cherished, teeming with vivid life, shared with family through clandestine meetings under the unfolding of moonlight. Lives intertwined by love, but also betrayal. It was not long before her fingers brushed against a particular passage, ink smudged, but still legible. July 14th. He knows. If he isn't kept away, there will be dire consequences for our family. Miss Marple's analytical mind whirred with implications surrounding the words. Who was he? Such ominous entries suggested that the garden had housed more than just botanical flavors. It had been a sanctuary for years, guarded fiercely, a window into deeper, familial darkness. Within the garden's embrace, the springing forth of blooms might conceal a murky reality below the surface. Before she could dive deeper into her discovery, a rustle broke the silence, mounted with fervor as the near dark invaded her periphery. Distracted, she turned sharply to see a figure emerging from the gloom, a tall gentleman. Yet the rain obscured his face behind a curtain of shadows. It was Quentin Shaw, his clothes plastered against him, eyes lit by a manic glow as he stepped further into the muted garden. "I told you to stay away," he barked, his voice edged with desperation, as if expecting her to unravel threads of suffering he wished to keep hidden. Anger flared beneath his drenched exterior, an unpredictable fire against the cold winds swirling around them. "Quentin," she replied gently, careful not to provoke him, "I did not come seeking confrontation, but rather understanding. There are secrets here, secrets that tie you to your aunt's demise." Her words hung, a wasp-delicate snare, waiting for him to react. "Secrets," he repeated, a mocking lilt threading through his voice. "Every family has them, Miss Marple. Yours, mine. It's the way of the world, isn't it? I believe one must also factor in loyalty and integrity," she countered, determined to peel back the layers trapping him in denial. "Your aunt was a formidable woman, but in her final days, it seems she was weighed down by guilt. Guilt perhaps over the term family, when it beckons storms much greater than those reflected just outside." He scoffed, glancing momentarily toward the shadows. "Guilt for what? I did not urge her to make foolish decisions, nor dictate terms upon her life. Perhaps not, but the diary indicates she feared someone, a malevolent force looming closer, threatening her peace." Her voice softened, but remained resolute. "Is that not a fate entwined with your own?" The ambient rain plummeted heavier around them, each droplet a whispered secret. Quentin's demeanor flickered as he wrestled with the intelligence of her words. The shroud of bravado showed signs of cracking. "And yet this diary you found, what proof will it offer?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "More than you know," she stated, meeting his gaze unwaveringly. "A journal implies the authorship of recollections, alongside the evolving tragedies of your family. It binds thoughts into a physical form that can expose choices made with reckless abandon." Just then, another sound drifted toward them. This one, distinct and foreboding, a faint wail echoing in the distance as a low rumble of thunder followed suit. In tandem with Quentin's brewing anxiety, Miss Marple could sense it at her core. Another truth, something lingering, just beyond reach. Lady Hawthorne's will, the one you mentioned, if it were drafted without her signature then? Miss Marple pressed, already seeing the road unfurl beyond Quentin's hazy answers. What power does it serve to keep her legacy safe, if one heir stands to gain without rightful coercion? I don't desire her legacy, not if it demands a standoff with family, Quentin spluttered suddenly, emotion punctuating each word. Pain echoed in his voice, mirroring years laced with unacknowledged wounds. Perhaps all I wanted was a whisper of her love. Yet you contend with shadows, she interjected sharply, pointing back toward the journal in her grasp. The very essence of her fears dictated no more than empty promises that have driven you here now. You fear the truth may shatter this romantic notion, do you not? His silence offered a wild contrast to the tumultuous rain, swelling into a whirlwind of confusion. In that suspended moment, they stood atop the precipice of revelation, lost in the haze of ancient grievances, until a sudden movement stirred. A branch twitched, and a chilling chill skittered down her spine. "Is someone there?" Miss Marple called out, an ominous, clock-like stroke echoing behind them. It was then they spun back, just as a figure, cloaked in darkness, flickered against the edge of the trees, a shadow moving stealthily away, slipping from their sight. "Who's there?" Quentin demanded, but the garden remained eerily silent, a sentiment that carried a weight all on its own. Miss Marple felt her breath quicken as she turned back to Quentin, realizing that the night had finally cornered them. "Something vital is hidden within your family, Quentin. The answers are tangled, but I sense the depth of the shadows now stretch beyond you." With that, she took a deep breath and clasped the garden journal decisively, aware that uncharted paths were more than just secrets. They were opportunities revealed amid shadows that whispered beneath the storm. Steeling herself, Miss Marple contemplated the next mystery to unveil, her eyes sparking with resolve against the bleak backdrop of hidden guilt. Racing against time, she felt the hourglass was nearly spent. Yet as she prepared to pursue the slip of darkness that had evaded them, she sensed something crack open inside the very grounds they stood upon. A stunted truth, rising from a hidden reservoir of despair. The rain glistened around her, a tangible danger drawing closer, the shadows now more alive than ever. With a determined heart, Miss Marple broke the silence that shrouded them both, knowing that whatever danger loomed beyond that edge signified the very heart of this matter. "Quentin," she said finally, voice trembling slightly yet steadying, "we cannot ignore this storm any longer. We must piece together the remnants before they are lost entirely, including the name on that handkerchief. The truth might yet save us." As she turned with renewed purpose, she did not catch the glimmer of resentment flickering in Quentin's eyes, nor the measure of trouble cloaked beneath layers of family grief. But with the storm still unyielding, Miss Marple would uncover every secret stained in guilt, her detective instincts honed sharper than the night itself. And as the storm roared, shadows trailing in silence unveiled a deeper truth yet to emerge, urging her toward a revelation that would bind them all inexorably, and perhaps expose a darkness that ran deeper than love or loyalty, whispering in the wind. Chapter 7. A Whisper from the Dead. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof of Miss Marple's cottage like a stormy orchestra lamenting an unfulfilled promise. Inside, the crackling firelight battled the chill, encroaching from outside, casting flickering shadows that danced uninvited across the walls. A comforting aroma of steeped tea wafted through the air, but Miss Marple's mind was far from cozy thoughts of warmth. Instead, it was a different kind of whisper that urged her to the edge of her seat, Her gaze flickered to the clock as it struck 6. High time for her afternoon to drown in a local mystery. The village of St. Mary Mead, usually wrapped in a comforting shroud of normalcy, had turned turbulent ever since Lady Hawthorne was found dead. The troubles seemed to swirl around her like tempestuous winds, and Miss Marple felt increasingly compelled to unveil the truth hidden within the storm. Just as the kettle whistled, a sudden knock shattered the illusion of solitude. It was sharp and urgent, a demand rather than a mere request. Miss Marple placed her cup aside and moved to the door, a curious frown knitting her brow. As she opened it, she was met by a disheveled Mrs. Clancy, the housekeeper of Hawthorne Manor, her face washed, pale, and drawn, rainwater dripping from the brim of her hat. "Miss Marple," she exclaimed, breathless and wide-eyed, "you must come at once. There's been a development at the manor, a discovery." "Another, you say?" Miss Marple replied, a spark igniting the corners of her mind. "What is it, Mrs. Clancy?" "There's a photograph, a faded one, found among Lady Hawthorne's effects. It has implications," the housekeeper stammered, urgency highlighted in every line of her face. "You must see it." With a quick nod, Miss Marple donned her coat, her heart racing as she stepped out into the chilling rain, keeping pace with Mrs. Clancy as they hurried toward the manor. The atmosphere inside Hawthorne Manor felt almost electric, the shadows thickening with anxiety as they entered the drawing-room, where Constable Perkins had gathered several villagers, each wearing expressions that blended apprehension with curiosity. The air was tense, heavy with unspoken thoughts and buried suspicions, and the flickering candlelight seemed to accentuate the fear that pulsed between them. "Gentlemen," Miss Marple greeted as she approached the cluster. "What seems to be the matter?" "Constable Perkins here is wrangling the truth from our friend, Dominic," said Mr. Hartley the baker, "but it appears our dear nephew has been less than forthcoming." "Regarding what?" Miss Marple queried, eyeing Dominic, who was leaning against the mantel, arms crossed tightly over his chest as though bracing himself against an impending judgment. "The photograph," Mrs. Clancy exclaimed, brandishing a small envelope she had clutched in her damp fingers. There was a photograph found amongst Lady Hawthorne's personal belongings, one that might just unravel everything. Miss Marple's heart seemed to skip a beat as Mrs. Clancy handed the envelope to her. As she withdrew the small, slightly crumpled photograph, her fingers brushed against the image. A group of 5 people posed around a fountain, all wearing expressions that oscillated between amusement and docility. The first face leapt out to her, a young woman with bright eyes and a fervent smile. Lady Hawthorne in her youth, vibrant and alive. But nearly eclipsing the youthful lady, another figure rested to the right, an unfamiliar man, his brow knitted with intensity, shadows covering part of his face in a way that suggested secrets of his own. It was that man who sent a thrill of recognition coursing through Miss Marple's mind, piquing her curiosity sharply. Before she could fully examine the photograph, Dominic moved closer, peering with a tinge of anger in his eyes. "What good is a photograph?" he scoffed, urgency betraying his bravado. "She had many friends. This proves nothing. Perhaps it is not just the photograph, dear nephew, but who is missing from it," Miss Marple replied, her voice steady and piercing. "Who is this man? There's something in his stance that hints at a deeper connection." Dominic's expression faltered, doubt flickering in his gaze. "It doesn't matter. He was part of her history, that's all. She outgrew her past." "Outgrew or concealed," Miss Marple countered, holding the photograph under the candlelight for all to see. "This photograph could be a key to the woman she once was. Yet, here we are, clutching at echoes of the past. The room fell silent as the weight of her words descended like the rain outside. The villagers exchanged glances, their minds filtering through possibilities and suspicions. Perkins, unyielding in his authority, gazed closely at Dominic. If there's a name connected to this man, we can begin unraveling the tapestry of lies you have woven tonight. Mr. Lark, with a desperate grimace, Dominic took a step back. You'll find no answers here, Constable. The past should remain buried, just like my aunt, he declared, though the tension in his voice betrayed his discomfort. Then we seek our answers elsewhere, Mrs. Clancy interjected, her eyes brightening. Perhaps it's time we consult the village archives. I believe I know an approach. Miss Marple firmed her grip on the photograph, the wheels inside her mind beginning to spin. Indeed, but before we delve into the archives, we ought to note the date, printed on the back, she urged, gently flipping the photograph to reveal yellowing paper that anchored their time. Something tells me this might be crucial. As she leaned in to decipher the fading ink, Dominic's expression shifted, a flicker of panic cleaving his composure. Let it go, Miss Marple. Lady Hawthorne's past was not meant to entangle us. We have enough chaos without dredging this up. But before she could respond, a sudden crash rang out from the study. Miss Marple whirled around, a sense of dread pooling in her stomach. By the heavens, what was that? Everyone stay put, Constable Perkins barked, rushing to the threshold of the study as fear rippled through the room. It was not just the nature of the crash, but the overwhelming sense of threat that loomed. In a flash, the constable swung open the door, revealing a sight that stole every breath from the onlookers. The study was in disarray, books strewn across the floor, papers fluttering like trapped birds. Yet, more notably, the tall bookshelf had been toppled, leaving behind a darkened crevice that seemed to plunge into an inescapable abyss. Dominic spectated in horror, his face paling as his earlier bravado crumbled entirely. "What sort of madness is this?" he asked aghast. Miss Marple's sharp eyes darted to the edge of the corner, where the shadows seemed to pull away. "No mistake. Something valuable has vanished here," she muttered, moving closer to the chaos. "But what?" Sudden shouting broke through the din as Mr. Hartley rushed in, eyes wild. "I've found something," he declared. "By the fountain out back. It appears—" But before he could finish, a figure emerged from the doorway, breathless and pale. It was Quentin, wild-eyed and soaked to the skin. "You need to run. There's something here." Before he could complete his thought, a sound echoed in the corner. The unmistakable rustling of fabric shifting upon wood, coupled with an almost imperceptible whisper that slipped through air like an unnoticed draft. "From the dead, it seems. Don't fall into the trap," Miss Marple warned, her voice a curling thread in the tumultuous tension. "For in that whisper lies the truth, most vital, a truth that could forever change the course of our destinies." Her heart raced as the pieces conjoined in chaos, the photograph, the sounds, the panic flooding their sanctuary. In that moment she realized they had breached the surface of something deeply buried, a foul secret, festering beneath pious walls, and it was time to confront the shadows, afraid to resurface. As echoes of hidden motives crashed around them like waves against the cliffs, Miss Marple sensed the air crackling with the promise of revelation. They had only just begun to glimpse through the veil of shadows, and yet the storm still raged, restless, while the whispers grew louder, urging them toward a truth that dared to arise from the dead. She clutched the photograph tightly in her hands, aware that whatever waited, beyond the storm, and within the echoes, was destined to redefine them all. With a gentle exhale, she turned back to the chaos, steadying herself against the wind of uncertainty, knowing that what followed would demand every ounce of her resolve. Chapter 8. The Key Beneath the Floorboards. The rain had transformed St. Mary Mead into a glistening tableau, its streets shimmering like silver ribbons under the pale glow of old gas lamps. From the depths of the manor, a muffled sound echoed, a soft, skittering thud that broke the tense silence enveloping Hawthorne Manor. Inside the library, Miss Marple crouched beside the hearth, her keen eyes scanning the chaotic debris left from the recent disturbance. Caught between the weight of mystery and dark revelation, she felt the urgency pulse through the room like a tremor of warning. "You must be careful, Miss Marple," Mrs. Clancy warned, unable to mask the tremor in her voice. "There's far more at stake here than pecuniary gain." What could be more significant than solving the truth of Lady Hawthorne's fate? Miss Marple responded, lifting her eyes to the housekeeper's worried expression. She caught sight of the worried knots twisting in Mrs. Clancy's hands, a taut reflex born of fear, but also, perhaps, of guilt. "Every truth has a cost," Mrs. Clancy murmured, eyes shimmering with the sheen of suppressed emotions. Yet before she could elaborate, a light flickered on the edge of Miss Marple's peripheral vision. Caught by the spectral glow, the soft rattle of air shifted within the library, beckoning her toward the shadowy recesses of the room. As the candlelight danced, Miss Marple's gaze fell upon the oak floorboards, their waxed sheen reflecting the embers of the fireplace. Her instincts tingled with anticipation. There was a subtle shift in the layout, a gap where the floorboards lifted just out of sync with the rest. Without hesitation, she knelt to investigate further, her fingers combing through the dust and debris. With a deft push, she confirmed her suspicion. One board came free at an angle, revealing a hidden compartment beneath, dark and waiting. A strange exhilaration filled her as she pried it open, her breath hitching in her throat when she discovered its contents. An intricately adorned key and a letter. "By all that is holy," exclaimed Mr. Hartley the baker, who had cautiously re-entered the room after the crash. "What is that?" Miss Marple held the key up to the dim light, its design exquisite and reminiscent of an era long past. "This key," she said slowly, "is unlike any I've seen, unmistakably unique, perhaps forged with purpose." She could sense the tension, radiating in the air, a coiling awareness that the pieces of the puzzle were now slowly coming into place. With resolute hands, she opened the letter, careful not to damage the delicate parchment. The ink had faded, but a few legible sentences soon came into view. "To whom it may concern, should I not survive." Her breath caught, astonishment mingling with dread. The secrets of the Hawthorne lineage must be protected at all costs. A sense of deep foreboding settled over her, the connection between the key and the letter shimmering just out of reach. "What does it say, Miss Marple?" Mrs. Clancy inquired, leaning over her shoulder, trepidation painting her features. "More than mere sentiments, Mrs. Clancy," Miss Marple replied, her gaze flicking between the handwritten scrawl and the key. "This suggests there exists a safe, one shrouded in the Hawthorne legacy, a repository of secrets that likely includes the unspeakable truth surrounding Lady Hawthorne's demise." Dominic, lingering just outside the threshold, stepped forward, deep lines of worry etched on his brow. "So this key belongs to the safe, then? It could unlock incriminating evidence against someone in the family." Or it could expose the very motives driving that person. Miss Marple corrected softly, her mind grappling with the implications. Something has compelled them to silence. There's something more than just inheritance at stake here. A family feud, perhaps, Perkins interjected, his brow furrowing as he considered the shifting dynamics surrounding them. But what would the key open? Something precious, I suspect, Miss Marple said, feeling clarity begin to wash over her. And I suspect any remaining traces may lie deep within this manor. The thought ignited a spark in Dominic's gaze. You suspect that one of us might be hiding something? I mean, it's absurd. We are family. Bonds that can never be broken. Except in times of desperation, Miss Marple retorted, a sharpness creeping into her voice. Family can quickly morph into betrayal when loyalty becomes strained, she continued, her attention returning to the letter. We may need to examine this more closely. In a moment of silence, tension swirled thickly in the room as the group grappled with Miss Marple's words. She watched Dominic closely, concealed emotions flickering within his eyes. Though he was outwardly defensive, a faint undercurrent of anxiety simmered just beneath the surface. A truth drifted on the wind. Without its articulation, the air grew heavy. You must understand, he finally admitted, voice low. I loved my aunt, but I felt the cold grip of neglect too long. Perhaps that made an invisible compulsion rise in me. Just then, the distant tolling of a clock echoed from the manor's hallway, resonating through the air. Perplexed, Mrs. Clancy turned her gaze toward the doorway. I fear we have kept the shadows waiting too long, she murmured, glancing at the key in Miss Marple's hand. Shadows reveal themselves when illuminated, Mrs. Clancy, Miss Marple said, determination threading through her tone. And I intend to shine a light upon this enigma, starting now. We need to locate the safe. I believe it lies within the heart of the library. With a resolution cutting through the oppressive atmosphere, Miss Marple began searching the walls, probing for hidden mechanisms. Her fingers danced along the polished wood, tuned to vibrations that upswept the thrum of the moment. As she passed the last shelf, she caught the faintest hint of something hidden. A button pressed against the wood. When she pressed it, the bookcase creaked, revealing a narrow compartment nestled behind the tomes. A breath left her body as she stepped forward to manipulate the concealed section, raising it like the dawning light behind a heavy curtain. There, resting within the obscured shelf, was an elegantly designed safe, the surface rich with wear, yet glimmering, undeniably inviting. Now let's sink our teeth into this, she said, and just as she reached for the ornate key, the air shifted around them, thickening with impending tension. The energy crackled, like the electricity before a storm, as she turned the key, hearing the familiar click of mechanics complying to her will. The safe creaked open, a hush falling over the assembled villagers, as the air quivered like frozen mist. Miss Marple peered inside, her heart hurling against her ribs as she saw the gleam of papers glow faintly in the light. And now we shall reveal the heart of the mystery, she whispered, her fingers trembling with the anticipation of unfolding truths. But before she could reach for the contents within, a shadow flickered past the door, a movement too quiet to be justified. What was that? Mr. Hartley exclaimed, his voice trembling, uncertainty tightening the connections between them all. Just moments before Miss Marple could react, a sudden gust of wind expanded within the room, forcing open the nearby window, sending papers swirling into the air. The clattering echoes merged with the distant thunder, intermingling with the fear that resonated inside. The urgency propelled them toward the threshold of peril, as Miss Marple raced to the window, her instincts alerting her to something sinister approaching. And upon turning, someone, an intruder, had not just slipped behind her, they had closed in fast. The key now hovered between revelations and threats, and as darkness encroached, she felt the weight of every choice made. "Stay close," she commanded, firmly, searching the edges of the gloom that loomed thickly, agony tightening her gut. "There's more than one truth hidden here, and whatever emerges tonight may determine our fates." As the tension mounted, the safe yawned wide, paper and shadows beckoning toward a climax that awaited answer in the heart of the storm. And in that suspended moment, as the pulse of the night quickened, Miss Marple knew they were irrevocably on the edge of chaos. A revelation powerful enough to shatter the fragile bonds of trust within Hawthorne Manor. Chapter 9. The Snare of Deception. The atmosphere in St. Mary Mead hung heavy with an unsettling tension, silent but palpable, like the oppressive humidity before a storm. Miss Marple peered through the rain-speckled window of her cozy cottage, the soft glow of the oil lamp illuminating the familiar contours of her well-loved furniture. She folded her hands in her lap, a porcelain teacup cradled within, half-finished, growing cold. Outside, the wind howled as it churned up dark clouds, foreshadowing yet another tumultuous night. Time was running thin, and the hidden truths surrounding Lady Hawthorne's death refused to lay dormant any longer. The villagers were gathering at the manor, their nerves frayed from whispered suspicions and lingering animosities brought to light by a veil of tragedy. Tonight, Miss Marple would set her trap, fishing for deeper truths, lurking beneath masks of civility. The antagonist was cloaked among them, and with a slight adjustment, her careful deduction could reset the stage for the final act. She stood and paced the room, piecing together fragments of the clues she had collected. The mysterious photograph of Lady Hawthorne and the unknown man, the engraved key now resting comfortably in her pocket, tangible evidence of what lay hidden in the depths of that ornate safe. As the clock chimed faintly, she readied herself to confront the tangled web of deception that dominated the bustling gathering about to take place. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Miss Marple opened it to reveal an anxious Mrs. Clancy, her eyes glimmering with trepidation. "Miss Marple, everyone is waiting at the manor. Are you sure about your plan?" "Absolutely," Miss Marple assured her, sensing that the housekeeper's apprehension sprung from a genuine worry for the fragile peace that bound the villagers. "A few truths must unravel before we can mend the fabric of our community. We cannot move forward without illuminating the dark corners." With a steady resolve, she donned her well-worn coat and joined Mrs. Clancy on a path navigated many times, each step forward a silent promise of adventure, tinged with danger. The rain picked up again as they neared Hawthorne Manor, transforming the path into damp silence, the usual comfort of familiarity interrupted by an undercurrent of suspicion. Inside, the warm glow of the fireplace mingled with the anxious murmurs of the assembled villagers as they huddled together in a circle, individual faces illuminated by flickering torchlight. Miss Pritchard, the village schoolteacher, fidgeted nervously, while Mr. Hartley was locked in conversation with Dominic, whose posture remained rigid. "Thank you all for gathering," Miss Marple began, her calm voice cutting through the restlessness like a knife. Instantly, all eyes focused upon her, and a hush fell. "Tonight, we shall uncover the layers of deception that siphoned Lady Hawthorne's life. both from this manor and amongst you all. But how can we trust your findings? Dominic's voice was sharp, desperate to expose her as an outsider. You are only a mere woman clutching at straws. It's precisely that rhetoric which breeds shadows of doubt among us, Miss Marple countered, allowing her gaze to sweep the gathering like a hawk. For secrets harbored in silence will more often than not rise up to disrupt the facade of propriety. She caught a flicker of movement, an intense gaze from Quentin Shaw, his expression caught somewhere between determination and despair. She remembered the flash of his defiance when the photograph had been revealed. His connection to the unknown man in Lady Hawthorne's past loomed like a dark cloud, too heavy to ignore. "Quentin, did you know this man?" she asked directly, her voice unwavering. His eyes flashed, a battle of emotions battling beneath his usually composed surface. I don't know who he is. I told you before. People from her past. I only learned of them tonight. It's immaterial. Now." An evasive retort, Perkins interjected, raising an eyebrow. "Shall we assume the truth lies deeper? Did she intend to confide in you, her family?" The room shuddered with breathless agony. Truth felt like an electric current, sparking amongst the group, igniting dormant fears. Miss Marple sensed that this would be her moment. With nimble fingers, she produced the key, holding it aloft. "This belonged to Lady Hawthorne. It opens mystery, binds connection. We must seek to discover what truth remains, buried deep." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, but she barreled on. "To reveal to you all that this key unlocks is a vital part of her legacy." She turned her gaze to the gathered villagers, pricking at their minds. "And tonight, I have set a trap. Those who possess the greatest secrets are often the greatest players in a game of revelation." With a conspicuous glance, she directed their attention toward the drawing room, where shadows seemed to stretch toward them. "We shall unveil these hidden truths tonight. What we discover shall expose the murderer amongst us." "Not if I can help it," Dominic spat, his voice rising in a tremor of fury. "You act as though we are mere pawns." "Not pawns, but the architects of your choices, I assure you," Miss Marple replied. "Now, are you willing to bet your innocence against the treasures buried in this manor? Let us retrieve that which must not stay hidden." The tension hummed thickly, and in that moment, a cacophony of emotions erupted between the villagers' tight lips, their rage and confusion boiling to the surface. As Miss Clancy stepped forward, her voice quivering, she added, "Miss Marple believes, and I do too, that tonight will bridge our pasts into the present." "I'll not stand idly by and be accused," Dominic shouted, the echo of his voice a painful reminder of bitterness. "Then stand resolutely with the truth, dear nephew." With her heart racing, Miss Marple pressed forward, setting the stage like a skilled orchestrator. The flicker of hidden motives and regrets shined like flickering lights in the gathering storm. "Stand with me in the drawing room, so we can finally snare the shadows that have haunted us for far too long." The glimmer of determination ignited within the villagers, nudging their spirits despite the swirling clouds of suspicion. One by one, they moved toward the gathering point, their eyes darting in mixed emotions, fear, intrigue, and unwavering loyalty tangled in an intricate dance. As they convened in the drawing room, Miss Marple set the scene by laying the photograph on the table, the truth vibrating just beneath the surface. She spread her arms, gesturing grandly as if parting a curtain on a stage filled with anticipation. "We will unveil Lady Hawthorne's deepest legacy tonight. But as she prepared to confront the delicate threads, a sudden sound stilled her efforts. A soft thud resonated from the study, companioned by a frantic whispering outside the drawing room. Someone has entered the manor, Perkins called, eyes wide, scanning the intersecting shadows that flickered against the walls. We should remain cautious. All the more curious, Miss Marple replied, her heart quickening again as she sensed the shift in their atmosphere. The wind outside swirling fiercely around the manor, as if to signal impending conflict. Miss Marple, Dominic warned again, his eyes narrowing, this will not end well if you continue to pursue this folly, ignoring his warning. Miss Marple pressed ahead, determined to lay the final pieces of the puzzle bare. We cannot ignore the drum roll of fate. Hidden truths weave the fabric of justice, Mr. Lark, just as the wind mingles with the rain tonight. With a hesitant nod, she prepared to unveil the secret once hidden behind the photograph, ready to expose the tangled web of deceit for all to see. But with shadows pursuing and emotions running wild, a figure quietly slipped through the gathering. A hand, reaching for her pocket, intent on snatching the key, as full realization poised itself on the edge. As heartbeats echoed like thunder in the rain outside, Miss Marple was poised at the crux of revelation and danger, her senses straining to capture the incoming storm. Just as the final door swung open and the perpetrator unveiled their darkest secret before the room's very eyes. "Stop right there," she shouted as she faced the danger head-on. The tension held fast like a taut string, ready to snap at any moment, and in that climactic flash of clarity, something vital slipped into action, a truth waiting to be born in the crucible of deceptions long woven. The stage as it stood set, each villager poised on the edge, daring each other to engage with their own darkness and ascend that night toward revelation or further entrapment within the snare of their deceptions. And as the truth surged forth, Miss Marple felt the heavy weight of her quest solidifying. Tonight's secrets would unfurl, one way or another, promising that Chapter 10 would be one of undeniable consequence. Chapter 10. The Truth, Buried in the Garden. The air crackled with tension as Miss Marple stepped into the garden, the rain drumming relentlessly against the stone paths, washing the world into muted shades of grey. The gathered crowd of villagers, faces illuminated by flickering lanterns, held their breath, their anxious eyes trained on her, like hawks watching their prey. When the constable called for all to gather in the garden, it had followed a revelation, a collective urge for answers woven tightly with fear. As she glanced around, her heart pounded, not from the oppressive dampness, but from anticipation. The garden itself was a lush tapestry of life, now shrouded in an ominous fog. The moon, veiled behind thick clouds, struggled to cast its light over the proceedings, leaving them cloaked in an eerie pallor. In the stillness, even the rain seemed to hush, listening intently as she prepared to unfurl the web woven from jealousy, betrayal, and deception. "Tonight, Miss Marple," began, her voice steady yet imbued with an urgency that resonated through the silence. "We stand among the memories of a life taken too soon. Lady Hawthorne's death was not merely an unfortunate incident. It is a consequence of tangled desires rooted in this very earth." She gestured at the garden, rich with memories and secrets buried beneath its sheltered beauty. Before she could continue, Dominic Lark stepped forward, his posture tense, anger simmering just below the surface. "You suggest we all have blood on our hands, Miss Marple, What makes you so certain it wasn't an accident? Because the evidence suggests otherwise, she replied, fixing her gaze on him. In addition, secrets buried in soil often fester into darkness one cannot ignore. Your previous denial only heightens suspicion. His eyes narrowed, but Miss Marple chose to ignore him, instead calling everyone's attention to a patch at the far end of the garden. Disturbed soil, fresh and uneven, a stark contrast to the lush green around it. I believe we have the personal touch needed to reveal the truth, she continued, an edge in her tone. The murder weapon may lie beneath our feet. Gasps resonated through the crowd, and Quinton Shaw, still visibly shaken, stepped beside her, bewildered yet cautious. Surely we must wait for the constable to give. Not this time, Quinton, she interjected, kneeling on the soaked ground and sifting through the loose earth with her fingers. The waiting has ended. The soil has murmured enough to unveil what each of you felt compelled to hide. As her hands dug deeper, a familiar structure solidified beneath her palm. A small, metallic handle, caked in mud but unmistakably shaped. With careful determination, Miss Marple extracted the object, revealing a revolver encrusted with grime, but still recognizable as the weapon from a life once cherished. A gasp echoed through the onlookers, and the murmurs of confusion turned into a swell of anxious energy. Lady Hawthorne was found with no weapon, yet how could this revolver lay just beneath her home? Miss Marple asked pointedly, her eyes flitting across the faces of the assembled villagers. Who has the most to gain from such a calamitous turn of events? Dominic looked shaken, his facade cracking amidst the burgeoning storm. But that's not mine. I can't. Neither does it belong to Lady Hawthorne, I assure you. Miss Marple cut in, her tone defiant, as she held the revolver aloft in the flickering light. No sign of rust or deterioration suggests this has not lain untouched for long. It has been placed here, deliberately. A moment's revelation of despair might just expose the cowardly intentions behind these hidden actions. With measured precision, she turned her attention back to the garden. Her fingers brushed the corner of dirt, and she uncovered a tattered envelope. A slip of paper, folded meticulously, its edge frayed but legible. She held it up triumphantly, the growing spark of recognition illuminating her face. And here we have an invitation, a letter tossed aside in haste. As she unfolded the paper, tensions surged through the crowd once again. This was intended for Lady Hawthorne, she stated, revealing the scrawled handwriting that twisted like a wretched vine, each loop trembling with fear. It mentions a meeting, a confrontation regarding her affairs on the eve of her death. Who sent it? A voice from the crowd jeered, and Miss Pritchard stepped forward, eyes wide with intrigue. Let's see, Miss Marple said, her heart skipping as she passed through the words etched against their fate. She continued reading, the urgency escalating in her voice at every line. It warns her about a visit planned that very evening, a life-altering decision that would dramatically shift the balance between relatives. But why the deceit, and whose voice crafted such desperation? The pieces began to shift, realigning in Miss Marple's mind. She glanced at Quinton, who stood rigid, face pale, caught between disbelief and realization. You were involved in this affair, she exclaimed, patience slipping as clarity began sealing unseen connections. The very key that unlocked this tragedy lay in the hands of both you and your family. There were stakes to secure, family reputations to protect. I didn't kill her, Quinton protested, the sincerity of his denial wrinkling his brow. But Miss Marple sensed a deeper fear brewing just beneath the surface, the slightest tremor hinting at buried remorse. You did, however, have a motive, a desire to keep your aunt silent regarding family matters. What about those rumors surrounding your financial predicament? She was preparing to dismantle the supports, keeping you afloat, wasn't she? Miss Marple pressed, her instincts sharp, sensing the heavy weight of guilt burdening his heart. Suddenly, Mrs. Clancy stepped forward, her eyes wide and brows knit with tension. But it wasn't about the money, she exclaimed. It was about love. The man in that photograph. She was willing to sacrifice everything for him, her dignity included. Dominic's expression morphed sharply, anger bubbling over. What do you imply, Clancy? That Aunt Isabel was enamored by a stranger and dragged our family's name through the mud? Perhaps, Miss Marple spoke softly, probing deeper beneath the layers. But it is not simply scandal we seek to uncover. Can jealousy compel someone to unveil a secret fate destined to arise? In the garden, her heart would have been laid bare, a sacrifice of deeper complexities. Suddenly, Quentin shot a glance at Dominic, horror painting his features. You think I would hurt family over money? I never desired that. It was my sense of self that was at stake. The shadows of our heritage followed like a ghost. Miss Marple, struck by his sudden fervor, seized the moment, feeling the thrill of solving the mystery within her. Then why the desperate attempt to conceal this relationship, Quentin? Why now? Are you scrambling for refuge? There is something you've been too frightened to acknowledge, isn't there? As the storm continued to lash the garden, drawing shadows into flickering chaos, uncertainty clawed at the air. Questions swirled just above their heads, and the weight of misrepresentation loomed heavy. Each villager, whose lives now entwined in suspicion, felt the piercing gaze of unease washing over them, their night of reckoning reflecting in the crisp air around them. Then, as if suspended in time, the door to the manor creaked, a sudden movement behind them like the opening of possibility. Miss Marple spun, her heart racing, as Quentin's eyes widened, shock painting his face like a ghost from the past. There's something we haven't considered, he declared, dread swirling in his throat. The man in the photo isn't the only one who held your aunt in his heart. There may have been another secret, the true reason for her fear that night. With the weight of his words, amplified by the downpour battering against the garden, Miss Marple leaned closer, her heart pounding. Then tell us. But before he could expound upon that vital revelation, something stirred within the dense shadows beyond the manor walls. An immediate click of silence filled the air, followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps. Someone was approaching, a presence draped in the dark. Miss Marple felt the stirring urgency pulsating through her as the night deepened, and the final pieces of this splendid riddle coiled ever tighter. What lay buried with Lady Hawthorne would soon spill forth, igniting long-held grudges and truths that refused to remain buried, secrets that perhaps had eternal consequences. The drawing storm shrieked out, raining down veils of unseen truths. As one final shadow stepped into view, it dawned on Miss Marple. The confrontation would unfurl, but perhaps not as she expected. And as the last of the clouds overhead parted, the truth, so intricately buried in the garden, begged to be unearthed, promising revelation encased in mourning silence. Would they awaken the past, or would they drown beneath the weight of its secrets, forever buried in the storm? The struggle for designating right and wrong had just begun, a dance led by shadows as the night unfolded into unwritten fates. Chapter 11. The confession. No one heard. The rain fell in a relentless symphony against the aged stone of Hawthorne Manor, turning the grounds into a treacherous mire. Thick clouds hung low, smothering any flicker of light, as if the heavens themselves mourned the events of the past days. Miss Marple stood on the threshold of the drawing-room, her heart drumming against her chest as unease hummed beneath the surface of the gathered crowd. The villagers' anxious whispers echoed in her ears, a blend of fear and anticipation as they awaited clarity from the chaos that had begun to ensnare them. Just moments ago, Quinton Shaw, pale and trembling, had hinted at another truth. Yet hesitation gripped him like a vice. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest within the assembled villagers. To lay bare the secrets that danced about them would bring no small measure of upheaval, but Miss Marple knew all too well that time was running short. Lady Hawthorne's death had forever shifted the sands below their feet, and tonight might demand sacrifices no one had anticipated. Casting her mind back to the photograph she'd uncovered, Miss Marple felt an urgent nudge at the back of her thoughts. The young woman's eyes, so full of life, spoke of passion intertwined with dread. Lady Hawthorne had hinted at a life unlived, one shrouded in whispers of forbidden romance. But what could be found that was deeper than mere sentiment? Beneath the facade of familial duty lay a myriad of emotions: fear, regret, love that could ignite rivalries and upend a household. As the villagers shifted nervously in the candlelight, caught between denial and curiosity, Miss Marple sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Everything hinged upon that moment, waiting for revelation to rise like the tide. I believe Quinton holds a vital piece of this puzzle, and I'd rather not pressure him into unveiling it against his will, she said softly, ensuring her tone broached no accusation. But I urge you to open the door to the truth that quivers behind that facade. I've said all there is to say, Quinton declared, frustration bubbling over. His hands, tense by his sides, spoke volumes that his words could not. My aunt led an independent life, and it was her choice to keep the past hidden. You can't ask me to resurrect a ghost from the shadows. Perhaps. Miss Marple met his gaze with steady patience. But one must admit, Quinton, your tie to these ghosts runs deeper than mere familial grief. What burden do you carry that ties you so closely to her fate? A flicker of guilt passed across his features, a ghostly reminder of concealed emotions. He began, but faltered, glancing at the gathering crowd. Their collective breath bated, then turned abruptly, seeking refuge in the shadows of his own silence. It was then that Dominic Lark stepped forward, face taut with an intensity that showcased the emotional toll of recent events. Don't you see? The longer we wallow in this uncertainty, the deeper we bury the truth, he declared, voice rising above the storm's din. Let's finish this. We all have memories that fester beneath the surface. Isn't that right, Quinton? Miss Marple's heart surged with understanding as the layers of animosity they shared began to unfurl. Fear had grown heavily upon them, knitting a web of secrets intricate enough to electrocute even the most resilient heart into submission. Perhaps it was not just Lady Hawthorne's secret they were protecting, but their own, delusions of innocence intertwined with family. With renewed focus, she peered closely at the gathered villagers, her resolve firming. If we are to transcend the shadows of last rites, I propose we combine our memories and endeavors. Perhaps we can piece together one last thread buried alongside Lady Hawthorne's secrets. A murmur of intrigue rippled through the crowd as Dominic's hand clenched tightly at his side, uncertainty racing across his countenance. "What is it you want us to reveal? The sordid details, you presume, lie undiscovered." Miss Marple inhaled deeply, sensing an opportunity woven with tension. "Yes, let us see the truths too well masked in denial. The broken promises, the threats hidden beneath layers of love and jealousy. Lady Hawthorne deserved better than to be cloaked in the burden of your failures. Her fate was intertwined with all of you." She stepped back, allowing space for them to draw closer, the tension thickening in the air like the prelude to a storm. "Quentin," she beckoned, her voice softening, "fear has reigned over your choices tonight. We stand at the port of a tide that has long formed, and by revealing the ghosts haunting you, we might finally rise from the ashes of this tragedy." Finally, Quentin stepped forward, his guarded aura flickering momentarily. She warned me to stay away from that man," he confessed, his voice barely breaking above a whisper. "But I thought she deserved happiness, even at the cost of our family." The candlelight illuminated his face, revealing vulnerability beneath the borrowed bravado. "I did not want to lose her, so I kept my distance. Yet, I received a letter the day of her death, a threat that forced my hand. It warned me to forget what she had promised, what I had discovered." The revelations sparked a wild flurry of questions, but Miss Marple held up a hand, urging calm. "You refer to another man, yet you've been keeping secret that she was entangled with someone once closer to your heart." "Yes," Quentin said, a deep breath shuddering its way through his chest. "From a time before I lost everything to him. And yet I became a fool, allowing my love for her to become irreparably intertwined in this mess." "Tread carefully," Miss Marple warned, deciphering his turmoil thoughts among the crowd. "Jealousy turns love into a deadly poison, and though you hold the key, it will remain tantalizingly closed unless we confront its source." Dominic's brows knitted together as the pieces began to assemble. "What do you mean?" "Perhaps there was an imbalance you have yet to uncover, a shift of power, masked in the deadly dance between love and resentment." Miss Marple paused, her thoughts racing. The photograph suggested ties beyond just romance. It could connect them deeper than you imagine. Quentin stepped back, his voice rising as he clutched his head in despair. "I never intended for any of this," Dominic surged with frustration. "You think the truth will save you. If you hide now, our family will be ruined by lies." A chorus of gasps echoed through the gathering, and the unease swelled again. Yet Miss Marple saw a flicker of opportunity in Quentin's eyes, a hidden fear and a yearning to be free of the shadows that loomed over him. "Then confess, Quentin," she urged, her voice a gentle but firm imploration. "Not just to protect yourself. Do it for Lady Hawthorne. What sins have cast shadows over your heart?" But before Quentin could answer, a voice enveloped them, coming not from the shadows, but from a hidden doorway at the far end of the garden. It was Mrs. Clancy, the housekeeper. "You all speak without context." Her voice cracked, tension lacing her words. "You don't know the truth of what transpired that night." The crowd drew closer, eyes widening as she approached, her trembling hands clenched into fists. "I saw the exchange. Before she died, I saw a confrontation, and knew the truth harmfully loomed within this garden much longer than any of you could imagine. It came at the cost of concealment amongst desire." Miss Marple's intuition flared. The truth she had anticipated was spiraling tighter, revealing yet another layer of guilt. "Did you witness something significant? Something that could unveil deeper connections to Lady Hawthorne's fatal destiny?" Yes, Mrs. Clancy replied. Her pale features conveyed the harrowing weight of her confession. I saw him, the man she loved, the one who made her face choices that would take her to dark corners. A hush fell upon the group, each breath echoing the latent fear suffusing the air. The wind rustled branches, and a flicker of lightning illuminated the night. Miss Marple focused intently on Mrs. Clancy, her heart racing. And who was it? She urged, the silence grinding into tension as anticipation coiled tightly in her mind. I cannot hold this burden any more, Mrs. Clancy breathed, her voice mere tremors fighting for form. It was him, the man in the photograph. My son. Gasps enveloped the crowd, mistrust blooming amid long-buried strife. Yet Miss Marple felt the adrenaline of revelation surging through her veins. With every passing second, it became clear that this windstorm illuminated the darkest shadows of grief woven among the estate. In those final moments of confession, time held its breath. The revelation had ensnared them all within the fabric of lies. But Miss Marple remained steadfast at the crux of understanding, poised like a spider at the center of her web, waiting for the final thread to weave itself through the storm's grumbling promise. With clarity emerging, she stepped toward the center and locked her gaze on each villager, feeling the weight of her final deductions rising within her. We are nearing the Chapter 12, The Secrets Beneath the Staircase. The heavy rain drummed steadily against the ancient stones of Hawthorne Manor, a stark contrast to the tense silence that enveloped the gathering in the drawing room. Miss Marple stood, her heart racing, as she faced the assembled villagers, each face a tableau of anxiety and suspicion. The flickering candles cast unsteady shadows upon the walls, casting the grim likeness of the past over the present. In her pocket, the revolver lay heavy, a stark reminder of the chaos that had erupted since Lady Hawthorne's death. Each thread woven around the tragic event had pulled tighter, and Miss Marple sensed they stood on the precipice of unraveling a mystery that had long veiled its true face. Just as she was about to address the tension hanging over them like a fog, a sudden sound drew everyone's attention, a soft creaking emanating from the far corner of the room, just at the base of the grand staircase. "What was that?" whispered Miss Pritchard, her voice trembling. The eyes of the villagers widened in unison, worrisome imaginings taking hold. "Merely the house settling," Dominic Lark scoffed, attempting a bravado that did little to charm the fear radiating through the gathered crowd. Yet Miss Marple sensed something beneath the surface of his facade, a familiar undercurrent of deceit, woven tightly with regret. In an instant, however, her instincts sharpened, compelling her toward the staircase. "Pardon me, everyone. I must follow this sound," she intoned, rushing past the villagers to press forward, intuition leading her like a thread of unseen fate. As she ascended the staircase, the air grew thick and charged. With each step, memories of whispered conversations returned, reminding her of how close they were to unlocking the heart of this mystery. The dim corridor at the top was lined with family portraits, each pair of eyes watching her as she moved. When she reached the landing, a faint glimmer caught her eye beneath the first step. Puzzled, she knelt down, brushing away dust and cobwebs to reveal a small, brass key embedded in the wood, shiny and distinct against the floor. It was both beautiful and ominous, as if it held a power meant to remain hidden. "What have we here?" she murmured to herself, her heart pounding with renewed excitement. The key fit the narrative she had long suspected. Something deeper lay concealed within the manor, echoes of unresolved pasts buried beneath layers of loyalty and betrayal. "Miss Marple," called Quentin, his voice echoing from the staircase below. "What are you doing up there?" "Just unearthing a potential clue, Quentin," she replied lightly, masking the intensity of her discovery. "Might I suggest for once that you attend down here and gather the others?" He hesitated, face flushed with anxiety, before buzzing with a nervous energy that flared at the request. "It concerns us all, doesn't it? I will fetch everyone," he mumbled, darting down the corridor like a firefly, fleeing into the night. As she tucked the key into her pocket, Miss Marple felt the thrill of impending revelation brush against her. The puzzle drawing nearer to clarity. The truth surged between her thoughts like a rising tide, while the storm overhead battered the estate, a reminder that she stood pivoting on the edge of danger. "Gather in the drawing room," Quentin soon called, the urgency carried within his tone. "Miss Marple has found something." The villagers shuffled into position, their faces a mix of hope and vexation, uncertainty pooled within their eyes. Miss Marple gathered the group together, glancing at each face, keen to discern layers of hidden motive that lingered just beneath the surface. "Tonight, I believe I've stumbled upon a crucial piece of our mystery," she announced, producing the key from her pocket, the glimmer of brass catching the candlelight. This key was hidden beneath the staircase, suggesting a concealed space, perhaps linked to Lady Hawthorne's affairs. Gasps represented the collective astonishment of those gathered. Undulating ripples of shock danced among the assembly of villagers. "But what on earth do you suspect?" Dominic broke in, voice rising with incredulity. "The garden showed us evidence of desperation, a revolver, revealing long-standing family tensions. Tonight, it appears something of greater significance is concealed elsewhere," she continued, feeling the weight of her deductions gathering strength. As she spoke, the flicker of shadows deepened, and a chill settled into the air. Mrs. Clancy stepped forward, a look of realization shifting through her pale features. "This key, does it unlock the safe within Lady Hawthorne's study? I've tended there often enough." "When will we unlock what must remain hidden?" Quentin questioned, unease knitting across his brow. "Tonight," Miss Marple asserted, her voice steady. "We must confront the ghosts that linger here, peel back the layers until we discover the heart of this twisted legacy." An inky silence fell upon the villagers as Miss Marple's words resonated. Yet, in the back of her mind, she felt flickering uncertainty regarding the spirits they were unearthing, voices from the shadows clamoring to be set free, their canny whispers too far leaderless to withstand surmounting revelations. Dominic's voice trembled as he spoke again, seeking validation for his fear. "What if the truth devastates our family even further? I thought our lineage would bring us peace, not despair." "We must forge our answers into a realm beyond despair, dear nephew," Miss Marple replied, her voice laced with compassion. "Truth often illuminates the darkest paths. Only then can light dispel the ghosts that haunt us." With a collective nod, the group made their way back toward the study, shadows gliding in tandem. Miss Marple led them, her heart pounding as they gathered near the concealed safe. Its presence now loomed like a tangible edge of fate, awaiting the moment of truth. In the intimate embrace of shared discovery, she inserted the key, feeling its weight offering satisfaction beneath her fingertips. With a slow turn, the locking mechanism engaged with a satisfying click, the hinges groaning as Miss Marple pulled the door open. "What riches await us?" murmured Mr. Hartley, a combative spark igniting behind his eyes. The safe yawned wide, revealing its contents. A collection of documents, fragile and yellowed with age, covered with Lady Hawthorne's familiar handwriting, alongside various items cloaked in dust. Miss Marple carefully examined the contents, her eyes flicking over each paper, grasping hints of debts, transactions, and relationships sprawling across the pages, intertwined with Lady Hawthorne's life. Among them lay a letter addressed to Quinton, filled with sorrow and longing, laden with secrets tucked away, like seeds of fate. "It can't be," he stammered, face paling. She couldn't have. It would have killed her. Kill her, or perhaps jeopardize the entire family. Words can extinguish more than life, Quinton. They burrow deep into conscience, forcing us into choices we fear to contemplate. Miss Marple's voice wavered, sensing the power of this moment. "But it appears you hold the connection between both the past and your own indecision." The villagers shifted, a whirl of emotions flooding through them as they battled revelations. Shadows thickened into uncomfortable silence, until a quiet gasp disrupted the murmurings, a realization blooming among them. With each passing second, the unease thickened, a storm edge rising within the room and beyond, leaving Miss Marple steeled for the revelations swirling dangerously close. "Quinton," she said, reaching for him gently, "the burdens resigned to roots can only cause distress if worn too closely. Will you lift the veil from your own darkness and share her truth with us? Only then can we truly lay these ghosts to rest." But before he could respond, another shout from the edge of the room arose, a gasp that refracted the very air. A new shape emerging behind the door, beyond the shadows, skin paled by the candlelight, illuminated by trembling anxiety. "Enough, it ends here," a voice rang out, echoing loudly, demanding attention from all sides. Who spoke? Who dared disrupt the clamoring storms and clouded fears threading fate? Miss Marple froze, a flicker of recognition sparking in her mind. The final pieces of the puzzle assembling against the backdrop of relentless rain. As the night descended deeper into chaos, one truth remained unspoken. Tonight's revelations would carve paths between the ambitious and those who merely grew lost in the shadows. With the specters of the past swirling around them, that shadow now materialized. It seemed the ghosts would come truly alive. In the pulse of that pivotal moment, it became evident that justice's price would demand clarity beyond measure, and as the storm raged on, they were poised on the precipice of revelation. The uncertain future waited to unravel itself before their very eyes, the walls themselves closing in with every resonating heartbeat, urgency rising, a desperate finale teased with a chilling confession just beyond their grasp. Chapter 13 awaited, and the thin veil between secrets and innocence trembled in the collapsing shadows.